Welcome to the Friends of Fantasy Benefits Baseball Podcast. I am Justin Mason, lead fantasy writer and analyst at friendsoffantasybenefits.com. Join me on this episode, as always, is Dave McDonald. Dave, how you doing, my friend?
Good, man. Just got back from the parents' house, hanging out for Christmas and celebrating with both sides of the family and everything. Always fun time to see everybody, but also kind of glad to get back home too. How are you doing?
It's good. You know, a little bit of a kind of peek behind the curtain. We are recording this a day after Christmas. You guys won't hear it till beginning of January as we ramp up our baseball activities by doing 30 podcasts, 30 days covering all the teams. I had a great Christmas. You know, always fun to empty the bank account in order to give obnoxious children gifts. So that's always a blast. Yeah, it was a good Christmas. However, we have a present for the listeners, and that is Michael Richards of Fantrax and Triple Play Fantasy. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Justin and Dave. Glad to be here. Been following you guys since I came onto the scene a couple of years ago, and always appreciated the work you guys put into things, and glad to be here to talk with you.
Well, and you put in some great work yourself. You won the TGFBI overall in 2022. Yeah. Congratulations.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Still kind of can't fathom it once I think about it, but I put in a lot of hard work into that. You know, I was putting in hours every time during Fab and spent months studying the draft stuff. So I'm very happy to have it in the bank and something to carry with me going forward.
Absolutely. Nobody can ever take that title away from you. You will forever be known as the 2022 TGFBI champion. But now what you have to do is you got to run it back for 2023. Definitely go and listen to the episode of the TGFBI podcast I did with Michael, where we kind of talked about what he did and how he took that down. I think it was very insightful episode of that pod. Michael, remind everybody where you reach on social media and then plug everything that you do.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at mprichards1981. I currently write, do mostly prospects and dynasty. I think I'm going to start sliding more into the redraft stuff as it gets towards the season for Fantrax. And I also do a podcast. It was supposed to be weekly, but it's kind of been like bi-weekly during the off season for Triple Play Fantasy called The Call Up with David Mendelson and a new host, Vinny, down on the Farm 8. So I really have a good time doing that. We bring on a lot of knowledgeable guests throughout the season. And, you know, even though I'm more locked in with the redraft stuff right now, I still think what we do each week is really helpful for dynasty and prospect people.
Yeah, definitely go check that out, because I don't think there are enough dynasty podcasts out there. I think the vast majority of them focus on redraft, and I think that is a really good niche you guys are kind of going after, and you guys do fantastic work. I play in dynasty leagues. I'm hoping I might win a dynasty league at some point. Hasn't happened. No, I guess it happened last year, but no dynasty championship for me this year. So
Justin's hoping he wins a league at some point.
Yeah, that's true. I'm watching a Colts Chargers game, hoping that I'm going to get into the championship in my fantasy football league. So, but that's enough. That's enough fantasy football talk for this episode. So we're going to be previewing the Atlanta Braves. Like I said, over the next month, you guys are going to be hearing or seeing, if you're watching over on YouTube, us preview 30 teams in 30 days. So the entire month of January, we're going to be dropping an episode every day. I'll move the episodes pretty quickly. You guys will kind of get a feel for the format if you're new. If you're also new, give us a 5-star review on iTunes. It really, really helps us out. If you do, we will give you a shout out on the pod, and I'll probably maybe do a giveaway or something like that here in the near future for those of you giving us those 5-star reviews. They really do help us out a ton. So let's start with the Atlanta Braves, and we're going to start behind the plate, where the Braves have added added to their catching core. They traded away Wilson Contreras on a 3-team deal that got them Sean Murphy. So Sean Murphy, the clear kind of favorite to be the backstop in Atlanta. Michael, does this move hurt his value, and would you take him where he's going?
Well, this is a kind of tough one for me. Person who would take
Michael, you're going in and out of mute here.
Yeah.
You're going.
Apologies for that. So I was saying, going into before last year, I was one of those people that kind of was dismissive of catchers in general. Like I felt like I could get them late, but then playing the two catcher leagues like TGFBI, I really thought there was something to going with catchers early. I don't really love Sean Murphy. I think it's probably like a slight downgrade overall. It's a better lineup, obviously. I think he's going to get less plate appearances, no speed, obviously. You're not going to get a ton of home runs, maybe 20 home runs. So it really kind of comes down to like how often is he going to play. I don't think it's a bad pick to take him there, but it's probably not something I would do. I think there's other catchers with flashier skill sets. It's like a more of a floor play. Like I said, I do like the lineup, but Sean Murphy's probably not the type of player that I'm going to spend a lot of draft capital on, especially with D'Arnaud backing him up too, because he was productive last year. I don't really love him a lot either, but I guess in general, no, I'm not going to be targeting a lot of Sean Murphy.
Dave, are you targeting Sean Murphy at all this year?
No, kind of echoing a lot of what Michael just said. I think he's solid. 20 homer power. He's got some stuff that I like, but I just don't see, going to from Oakland where they were finding ways to get him in the lineup every single day, even when he wasn't catching. I don't see Atlanta doing that. I think they have too many guys that they have to play. It is possible that maybe they just stop giving Marcell Ozuna. He was basically like a part-time player down the stretch. It's possible that they, play him over Ozuna at DH. Because they've got Rosario there too. Maybe Ozuna gets some time in left field again too. But I don't know. I feel like Michael was saying, a lot of his value is going to be tied to his playing time because you kind of know what he is. He's not going to give you speed. He's just like a solid hitter. I'm guessing he'll probably hit towards the bottom of the lineup in Atlanta. I just don't see him getting as many at bats. I think he's fine. I think if he falls to you at a point where it makes sense, it's cool to grab him, but he's not going to be a target for me.
Yeah, and I think the problem is I think this move will continue to bust him up the ADP because people are like, oh, he's getting out of the Oakland Coliseum. Right. He's going to be in a better lineup. Well, now he's not going to be hitting second in the lineup. Like right now, Roster Resource has him projected for fifth, which is fine. Like it's a good spot in and a really good lineup. However, like he got 619 plate appearances last year, led all of major league catchers in plate appearances. There's no way he can repeat that because, like you said, like Ozuna is going to be DHing. Ozuna's terrible as a fielder. Like he should not be in the field ever. And now they may force him out there every once in a while, but there's no way that Murphy's going to even get close to 600 plate appearances. I'd be surprised if he got 500 plate appearances. And I think that just really hurts him. And Atlanta's, while Atlanta is an upgrade in terms of park, definitely in terms of team, but in terms of park, it's an upgrade. It's not as big of an upgrade for a right-handed hitter. If he was a lefty, then I'd be like, okay, he could take advantage of that short porch in SunTrust or whatever the field is called now. But taking advantage of left field, it just isn't as much there. So he was a guy that I was targeting in some early draft before the trade. After the trade, probably going to back off and go other directions. Do we care about Travis d'Arnaud at all, Dave?
Not really. You could take a shot on him in like a DC late as like your third catcher or something like that. Like he'll play some. I just don't know, if it'll be more than like twice a week. It's tough to see right now a much more of a path to playing time.
What about you,
Michael? I agree with that. He's a backup catcher cleared to me at this point, so the playing time is not going to be there. And last year was his most productive season since 2017. He only played 107 games, and catcher's different, but he would basically pick up the similar value that he had last season if Sean Murphy got injured. But otherwise, I'm just not really interested in him.
All right. Matt Olson, first season in Atlanta, had a pretty good one. 34 home runs, over 100 RBIs. Only hit 240, though. BABIP was a little bit low. Are we worried at all about Matt Olson, Michael, or could he potentially even be a value around pick 40?
This is always a tough one for me. I usually like to target, elite pitching and top-end closers and guys with speed early in drafts. I actually say that, and I took Vlad Jr. in the first round of TGFBI last year. But the batting average part of this he's got a chance to get a low batting average, and he has no speed. He's obviously one of the better sluggers in the league, but he hit 22 of his 34 home runs after July 1st, but he only batted 219. He's definitely one of those hard hit guys, like top 5% in exit velocity and max exit velocity and hard hit percentage. The one thing that I will say in favor of him is I think he's one of those players where the shift could help him out. I think his BABIP was his it was low last year, but I think it was 370 when he's not against the shift. So there's a chance he could have a decent average. I guess what I'm saying here is if he puts together like every piece that you need him to, he could be a 4 category guy, to a certain degree, 3.5, 4 category guy and work out. But I'm probably going to be looking in a different direction personally, because I think I can find similar power later.
Dave?
Yeah, 100% agree. I mean, it's just what he's giving me at that early of a pick. It's just it's not doing it for me. Like if I'm taking a pure power player at that point in the draft, he has to be giving me a good average on top. I can't be just getting 3 categories from a guy. I mean, like, what's the difference between Matt Olson and Christian Walker 100 picks later? I mean, he's basically the same type of player. Now, is Olson better? Sure, but not much. They can put up about the same power, the same average. Wouldn't shock me at all. Better lineup for Olson, probably better runs and RBI. It's just not worth it to me to be taking a guy like that early in a draft when I need other resources. I need to get that average. I need to get those steals. Like Michael said, your elite starting pitching, even a closer at that point. Matt Olson will not be on my radar at whatsoever.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I still think top 40 feels a little high when, like Michael said, like you might be looking for your first closer in that 3rd round. You might be looking for a top tier starter in the 3rd round, or you're at least looking for a guy who can contribute in the scarcest of categories, which is typically stolen bases. So, and first base, while it's not necessarily extremely talent rich, is still pretty darn deep. So there's lots of guys you can kind of pivot to if Olson isn't your cup of tea. Let's talk about Ozzie Albies, because this one is a polarizing player. He was a 1st round pick last year. I took him on one of my main event teams. I took him on a couple other teams. He was atrocious. Missed a lot of the season due to injury, but even when he was on the field prior to the injuries, he was struggling. Dave, Ozzie Albies is currently going a lot later than we'd seen him in the last couple of years. Is this a value? Is this time to jump back on, or are you avoiding Ozzie Albies?
Probably, yeah. I'll have to see to make sure in spring training that he's healthy, ready to go. I don't know why he wouldn't be. But yeah, I mean, like you look at his stats from last year and everything was like pretty much off. The barrel rate was like halved. The hard hit rate was way low. The max EV was way down. Just pretty much across the board. He didn't look like he was healthy last year. Never really got into a rhythm. He just didn't look like himself. I don't know what would prevent him. He's only 26 years old. I don't know why he wouldn't be able to get back to that point again. And if you can get him outside the first few rounds, he's going 4th round? Yeah. I mean, in the 4th round, if I can get those 5 category kind of guys like him, I'm in on him.
Yeah, he's going about pick 52 on average.
Yeah.
I've popped him twice already in drafts in the 4th round. Feel pretty good about that. Michael, where are you at on Albies?
I agree with everything you guys are saying here. This was a guy who's creeping into the late 1st round last year, definitely 2nd round pick. He was someone that I was targeting in 2nd rounds last year. And I think just that alone, like Dave said, 26 years old, plays a premium position, has some power and speed. It seems like a good idea to take a guy who's dropped a couple rounds that could be like a core piece for you. And, getting him in the 4th round doesn't put as much pressure on him to be like that main guy for you too. So, I took Trevor Story in the 3rd round last year. I regret it, obviously, but I'm definitely willing to take someone like Ozzie Albies in the 4th. And honestly, without looking super deep into it, I think he would be one of my prime targets in that range.
Yeah, I completely agree. He's, a guy that I'm going to always be looking to pop in that 4th round. Getting 5 category studs like a guy like Albies, I think is worth the risk. And yes, he has been nicked up a few times over the last years, but he's also put together like elite plate appearance numbers in other seasons as well. So And you got to feel like, especially like the injuries that ended the season are pretty fluky. Like, is he going to get hit while bunting again? Like, I don't know that I'm super worried about that.
It's you're buying low on a good talent, and that's exactly what you should be doing.
Yeah. Moving over to shortstop, though he's only eligible to start season at second base in most formats, is Vaughn Grissom. With Dansby Swanson leaving, it appears Grissom is going to have at least a shot to be their everyday shortstop starting out. Michael, what are your thoughts on Grissom? Defensively, I don't know how well he's going to be able to handle the position, but it's a guy with an interesting skill set.
Yeah, I should start by saying I've been in on Vaughn Grissom as a prospect going back. I was surprised he got moved up from AA, got the Michael Harris treatment. And he was one of my pickups in Fab too that kind of helped me when he was going. During his stretch when he was hot, he had a 291 average, 440 slugging, which ranked him 5th among second basemen. He doesn't hit the ball quite as hard as some guys. He only had a max exit velo of 107, average of 84. But this is a guy who's really has good contact rates in the minor leagues. Hasn't really developed into his full power potential yet. But I like his speed. I like his baseball IQ. I like that he's not being drafted like a proven player yet. He's, you can get him around pick 200 still. And with the second base and shortstop, I could see myself looking for Vaughn Grissom, because after experiencing the bigger leagues last year, I think you should make a concerted effort to build your foundation with your first 10 picks. So through pick 150. And then in that 11 to 20 range, I was big on volume last year, but I think you want to go for volume combined with upside. So someone who's like Vaughn Grissom, who could potentially move into the top 10 rounds production wise if he gets going. That's the type of guy with dual eligibility in middle infield and power and speed that I would be targeting in a lot of leagues.
Dave, where are you at on Vaughn Grissom?
Yeah, I mean, a guy coming up straight from AA and only 100 plate appearances at AA as a 21-year-old, and he was not overmatched at all in the majors, 22% K rate, and I expect that to go down as he gets, more plate appearances in the majors. I mean, he's been a low K guy, 14% basically in the minors. I think once prospects come up initially, they struggle and then they kind of settle close to where they were with their plate metrics in the minors. I think the only thing that I hesitate with him is will he get playing time? I don't know that I believe that Atlanta is going to go into the season with him as their starter at shortstop. I think if I were doing DCs right now, I don't know that I would be taking him where he's going. Not that it's not a fair price for him, just because I just feel like I've heard a lot about them trying to acquire a shortstop still. So I don't know. I don't know that I trust the playing time just yet. I think that's really where I'm at. Once he has the job, I think the ADP will probably shoot up a bit if he is going to be their starter going into the season. And we'll have to see where he lands, I guess, is that because I am interested in the skill set. I just don't trust the playing time yet.
Yeah, I do worry because, I think a lot of the talk has been in Atlanta, defensively. I don't know that Grissom can handle shortstop on a day-to-day basis. Maybe in a pinch, you fill it in kind of thing, you kind of take the gamble, a game here, a game there. But him playing, 140 games shortstop seems very, very ambitious. As of right now, like Dave mentioned, and like I said, we're recording this on December 26th. Hopefully nobody signs for Atlanta between now and when this podcast drops. Maybe I'll record an addendum or something like that if it does. But he looks like he's going to be playing every day. And I think even if for some reason they do sign someone, they will find a way to get him in the lineup. Marcell Ozuna isn't the player that they originally signed. Eddie Rosario was atrocious last year, even when he was on the field. They'll find ways to get him in the lineup, and injuries always kind of work themselves out, right? So I bet on the over on 500 plate appearances, and if he gets to 500 plate appearances, I could see him being like a 15-15 guy with like a 280 batting average. That's something I love around pick 200. And he's a guy that he hasn't shown amazing contact skills necessarily in the minor leagues, but he showed them in that small sample. So how much do we believe the 90% zone contact? I tend to want to believe it, and maybe that's just rose-colored glasses. But at pick 200, I think it's a pretty worthy gamble, especially he's got second base eligibility to start here. Going to pick up shortstop at some point. I like the gamble on Grisham. Let's move over to Austin Riley, finish out the infield. Riley, had a lot of people who doubted him. Could he kind of keep up what he did in 2021? Did a pretty darn good job of it, Dave. What are your thoughts on Austin Riley? Is he a target for you?
Yeah, I like Riley a lot, but he's tough again, like for kind of the same reasons as Olson, except for unlike Olson, he actually can hit for a good average. I don't know how much I buy into him hitting. Like, I don't think he's a 300 hitter, but I think he could probably hit 275 again. I don't know. Like, I think he won't be a target for me, but he's a guy who I could still see myself getting if he fell a little bit. I think what I really want to do is get a guy like Jordan Alvarez early if I'm going to be taking a power only hitter. Like, I want to get someone who can hit like 300 plus and with that kind of power. I'm willing to take him first and then get whoever else I want to get in the second round to kind of complement him. And I don't want another guy like that. Like, I wouldn't want to pair him with Riley. I would want someone's going to give me some speed in that case and something like that, or maybe a frontline pitcher. But I also like him because he's a third base player. He's eligible at third base where the pickings are a lot slimmer than they are at first base, I think. So I think that's one thing he has going for him. But I believe in the skills. I love Riley, but I just don't see myself targeting him right now.
What about you, Michael? You targeting Riley?
Well, I can't really add too much to what Dave said there. I think all of that is accurate. You can definitely win fantasy leagues with a player like Riley as your second round pick. And, like I had Machado last year. Machado's a little bit different, probably higher average floor, but the big power, like a guy who could get you close to 40 home runs with a good average, he's a legitimate 4-category player. And third base is weak. What I do like about him is that he's going behind, Machado and Devers. Like, you can get him as the fifth third baseman off the board, and I actually like that. Now, I agree with Dave. I'm not necessarily going to build my teams around it, like plan it out to go with him, but I'm not going to be upset if he ends up being my second round pick as my third baseman. And he was really good last year, and he's still young too. I think he's locked into that lineup, like in the middle of the order. I don't think there's any danger of him losing any playing time. And just all the different metrics that you look at, like when you compare him against all the other third basemen, like his breakout was legitimate. So if he's not being treated like the cream of the crop at the very top, I think he's a good fallback at third base.
I like Austin Riley a lot. I also like Rafael Devers like a lot. I think they're both really good players. I don't think they're necessarily bad picks. I have a really hard time making those picks though, because what is the difference between a guy like Austin Riley at pick 21 and a guy like Nolan Arenado at pick 38? Like, is there really that much of a difference? I don't know that there is. I think they're just about the same player. And Austin Riley's younger, so he's going to go, 10, 11 picks higher or around higher. And so, I have a really hard time now. To Austin Riley's credit and third base pool's credit, third base has a massive drop-off after the top 6, like a massive drop-off. So, if you don't like a lot of the bottom tier, I tend to think there are some really interesting options in the second and third and fourth tiers of third base. So I don't mind if I'm not getting a Jose Ramirez or a Witt or a Machado, then I don't mind waiting. But some people really don't like the depth of the pool at third base. And so I can understand spending that second round pick on a Devers, on an Austin Riley. To me, I want some speed. I don't want 2 stolen bases. I want 10 stolen bases.
It just makes you want Jose Ramirez in the first that much more.
Yeah. And and more likely than not, if I'm gonna take a third baseman in the first 2 or 3 rounds, it's going to be a guy that's going to give me speed as well as the power. So
don't forget Gunnar Henderson also was third base eligible around pick 92 for some speed.
Not the Baltimore Orioles preview, but we'll get there. I'm not as big a fan as on Gunnar Henderson, and we'll talk about it when we get there. Coming up, I will be recording that one with Alex Fast, Baltimore Orioles fan and native Alex Fast. So definitely stick around for that one in the next couple days. I think that one's coming out pretty early on because B is at the beginning of the alphabet, and I tried to book a lot of these in alphabetical order.
Very good, Justin.
Right? You like that? Moving on to the outfield. I mean, Ronald Acuna Jr., he's a stud. He's currently going as the number 2 player off the board overall, right behind Jose Ramirez. Michael, any qualms about drafting Ronald Acuna in the top half of the first round?
I mean, the only qualms you could possibly come up with, in my opinion, would be injuries. You know, he did play 119 games last year, still stole 29 bases. His power went down a little bit too, but, you know, the StatCast data looks largely the same to me. You know, I've always been a big fan of him. You know, he was someone I was trying to target a lot in the first round. Trying to take advantage of people's perception of him last year, and they ended up being right. But now that we're even further removed from that sort of stuff, he's still young enough to me where I feel very comfortable with him as my first round pick, you know, and even if he does end up missing a chunk of time, I still think it's not going to sink your team. So basically, like I said, it's really only injury concerns. The skills and the fantasy goodness here is kind of what you want out of a first round pick.
Dave?
I think last year after coming back, I think he was struggling to get going early on, and I think he was trying to force it. Like he was swinging, he was a lot more aggressive. He was swinging more. He was swinging a lot of outside the zone stuff more than he usually does. And, you know, as a result, I think he ended up with, you know, his metrics were down a bit across the board. You know, the barrel rate was way lower. The launch angle was way lower. He hit a lot of ground balls last year, but, you know, this is a top of the line elite player. So I think he's going to make the adjustments and come into spring training healthy. Yeah, I do. It was nice to see him run a shit ton last year. I don't know if that was him trying to get himself going, maybe, though. I don't know if he's going to continue to run that much next year, but with, you know, all the new rules and everything, you can easily make an argument seeing him for, like, you know, 40 plus bases, and that wouldn't shock me at all. And I do think that the power will come back. So I'm in on Acuna. I mean, anybody with that skill set where he can give you, like, you know, potentially give you 40-40 with, you know, 280 average. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you can really go wrong with Ronald Acuna. I mean, I think what we saw last year was kind of almost like a floor for him, right? Like he, you know, almost got the 30 stolen bases in spite of the fact he only played 119 games, hit 15 home runs. You know, 266 average is fine. But I think that he's a legit 30-30 candidate, maybe even in better than that. Actually improved his contact rates throughout the season. The launch angle is a bit of a concern. We did see that ground ball kind of rate kind of spike. And while it improved a little bit kind of over the course of the season, it never really got back to where we've seen in previous years. And I don't know if this was like maybe he's coming off the injury, having an issue like planning on that foot, or just being a little bit more tender about it. You know, it's I guess there's a little bit of cause for concern, but I just like even with that, like he still hit 15 home runs in 119 games, stole 30 bases or 29 bases. Like he's a stud. Like I just there's no complaints. And with that, we probably talked way too long on one of the elite players of the game. So moving on to Michael Harris, the second, who is another one of these guys who's a polarizing player. And for pretty good reason. He is going extremely high in drafts after a kind of a breakout season. He is going 25th, not 25th among players, not 25th among outfielders, 20, you know, at pick 25. So I guess not 25th. I understand the skill set's dynamic. I can't pay that price. Michael, can you pay the price on Michael Harris second?
So I definitely gave this some thought for a while because I haven't really dug into him too much, but I'm with you on this. I really like the skills. I think he played amazing for being a 21-year-old who skipped over AAA. And even projections right now, see him as a good average 2020 type of guy. And I think he's kind of locked up in that upper part of the lineup. So a lot of things on paper suggest that he could be a good pick, but you're just paying up all the way for a second round pick for a guy who has about 400 plate appearances in the major leagues. There's just too many good players. I mean, the speed is enticing because I do like to get those well-rounded players early, but I would just see myself fading Michael Harris this year and just kind of letting it play out and see where he's at next year.
Dave?
Honestly, the only issues I have with his skill set are, I don't think he's going to have, his home run per fly ball rate was like 23% last year. So I off initially would think that, okay, the home runs are going to come down. But then looking at the projections and looking at, the forecaster, everything seems to say that the power is legit. I love his batting metrics. Again, sub 20% K rate in the minors. He walks a decent amount. He didn't walk as much when he came up, but again, he's a 21-year-old in the majors. Came up from AA with only 200 plate appearances, and the ground ball rate was too high. 56%, but everything honestly outside of that looks good. Like hard hit rate, max EV. 10% barrel rate. The launch angle is a little low, so because he does hit a good amount of ground balls, but I don't really think I have any hesitation taking him where he's going. I want to get as many of those combo players as I can. Now, is he going to be the guy that I specifically target in that section? I don't know. Like if I can get like a Paul Goldschmidt or something, Francisco Lindor, I might not take Harris. Like I think at pick 25, there's other options there of guys that I can get. I have a feeling he's going to be a guy who slides a bit, though. I don't know that I see NFBC drafters taking him over, say, Goldschmidt or Lindor or stuff, guys like that. As we get closer, I could be wrong to like the live drafts, but I do see him as an option. Is what I'm saying. I don't think he's like a fade for me.
All right, I'm going to give you a list of players. And then you're going to tell me what they have in common with Michael Harris, Javier Baez, Nick Castellanos, Ahmed Rosario, and Michael Harris II. Anybody? It's not a great list to be on.
No, I know. I was. Go ahead.
It's the highest O swing in the majors.
Yeah. Okay.
And there's no way he can maintain that strikeout rate if he's going to swing outside of the zone over 41% of the time. He's just, people are not going to throw things in the zone to him. Pitchers are going to see him multiple times and go, okay, well, you can clearly hit a fastball. You can clearly hit stuff that's in the zone. But if you're going to swing outside the zone almost 50% of the time, why am I going to throw it in the zone? That's going to be a huge problem. And I think that's where you start getting to some real issues for a guy like Michael Harris. Now he's young. It was his first time in the majors. He skipped AAA. Like, there's a lot of reasons why we can go, hey, you know what? He got excited. He got up there. He was hitting well. Like, it didn't hurt him, right? So I want to see him make adjustments. And when you're taking a guy in the second round, I want to feel pretty darn good the floor is safe. I'm not drafting for upside necessarily in the second round because everybody in the second round has upside. I'm drafting for the guy that I feel is the most likely to return second round or give me first round value. Michael Harris is not that guy for me. It's not that guy.
You were talking about him, and I was curious, with those free swingers, yeah, the profiles are a little less stable than others. Who else do you think of, though, on the other side of that who's really good? Maybe who's retired, but who do you think of who swings at everything?
Maybe retired.
Well, there's someone specifically I have in mind who swings at everything and hits everything. No, Vlad, right?
Senior?
Yeah, Vlad Senior. Yeah, so I was looking at his metrics. He was like a 40% O swing guy too, but he always had like 81% plus contact rate with the zone contact rate around 90%. Now, Michael Harris isn't quite there. He's at 73.5 contact rate with an 86%.
Let's not compare a 21-year-old.
I know. I'm just saying, like,
41 plate appearances.
The question is whether
Hall of Famer. Like,
obviously, Justin, obviously, but it's whether that approach, it can work. And I'm saying I agree. You're right. Like, that is. I do think he'll make adjustments, though. He's 21. So I'm not going to put too much stock in that, but I do think it's worrisome. It's something that people should be concerned about.
I think one of the things you want to look at in spring training is strikeouts minus walks, right? It's one of the stickier things in spring training for hitters and kind of go, okay, is this guy striking out or walking more? If he's showing a more patient approach, because right now what he's showing is, hey, I can swing the bat, but I don't really understand what the strike zone is. If he starts showing, hey, I understand what the strike zone is, then I can get on board with that second round price. But as of right now, like, why would I take him in the second when I could get Randy Rosarena in the fourth?
I really want to know what his contact rates were in the minors, and we can't see that, unfortunately. But because guy hit 300 plus at every level that he was at, pretty much. So he never had a K rate that was very high either. So it was always under 20% other than a short stint in low A. But I don't know. I'm curious to see. I wish I knew more, but I think you're right to be a little bit concerned with that swing.
Yeah. Moving right along to other outfielders on this team, we've got Eddie Rosario, Marcell Ozuna, and Jordan Luplow. Do we care about any of these guys, Michael?
Not particularly. I mean, I guess Rosario or Ozuna, if he was able to bounce back and like an injury that led to more playing time for these guys. Luplow or whatever, I don't really consider him a valid piece. I mean, he's like outfield depth. Like I said, those two guys theoretically could gain value if they got everyday jobs and were playing well. But outside of that, they're not the type of players that I'll be targeting in most leagues.
Dave?
I'm interested if they should be pretty cheap. I mean, we don't know what the problem with Rosario is. I don't know that I see him playing every day. I think he'll probably be mostly a platoon player, maybe even less than that. But he has an interesting skill set where we've seen him be effective in short stints. But last year he was just like a completely different guy. I mean, like, he clearly wasn't right. The K rate was way up. All the metrics were way down. Nothing looked right for him. Now, Ozuna, on the other hand, again, the big thing is playing time. I mean, we saw them sit him down the stretch. They're paying him all that money, and they clearly don't care. Like, they're Atlanta's there to win, so they're not just going to play someone just because they're paying him. He still had 23 homers, but that came with a 226 average. I do think that there's a decent chance that he hits closer to like 240, 250, maybe even. But will he get to play every day? Will he, I think the playing time is not there. And obviously with everything that's going on with him behind the scenes, he's not someone that they're going to have a ton of patience with, I don't think. We also saw him continue to walk less and less. Like he was walking 14% of the time in 2020, and then he's down to 6% last year. It's just things are not trending in the right direction for him, and I don't know, but he is interesting to me for where he goes, though. Like, Rosario's 500, Ozuna's like 315 in draft champion since November 1st. So I think he's interesting. I don't think he'll be a target, though.
I'll take a gamble on Rosario given the price. I mean, Ozuna, he's so bad defensively that they really can't afford to even put him in the field. And I think they're going to want to use that DH as a rotating piece to keep other guys healthy, to give Sean Murphy added at bats, give Travis d'Arnaud added at bats. And I just worry that, especially with the off the field stuff for Ozuna like that, they're not going to want to give a guy who's hitting 200 that many at bats, especially with all the other issues going on. So Ozuna, I'm pretty much out on unless he just extremely drops in the draft. Rosario, I'll chalk a lot up of what happened. I mean, he's had injury after injury after injury, and they're weird injuries. I mean, like he had a stomach issue, and then he had like an eye infection issue that kept kind of reoccurring. If he's healthy, he's a guy that in a really deep league, I'll take a gamble on because we've seen him be really good. We've seen him be able to produce in a lot of different categories. And so, I mean, I'll take a gamble on Eddie Rosario that he can get back to being even like half the player that he used to be because he's an easy cut, right? Like if he's not working out, like he's, a guy you just throw right back onto the waiver wire or in a DC, you're starting someone else. But I think he's got the best potential out of this trio to like way outperform his ADP. So moving on to the pitchers, Max Fried, stud, Dave, or is he a guy you avoid because of the lack of strikeouts?
I really like him. I think, he's proven that he's a guy you can rely on just to be a really, really good pitcher, with great ERA, pretty damn good whip too. Obviously the strikeouts are the big missing piece. Here's the thing with Fried though. It's not that he can't get strikeouts, it's that he doesn't. And I don't know if that concerns me more or less, because I think that if he wanted to, he could flip a switch and get more strikeouts. I mean, his changeup and his curveball are both really, really good and get a lot of swinging strikes. His slider is not great comparative to other sliders. His sinker obviously is not a strikeout pitch. And his four-seamer doesn't get a ton of swinging strikes. But if he went for more strikeouts with the curveball and the change, he can get them. So he can flip that switch at any point. It's just a question of, will he? I don't know the answer to that, but he's not a guy I'm going to be avoiding because he's just so good. I mean, you can rely on him to be an anchor for your staff. But, if you're comparing him to, say, Kevin Gausman, who goes at the same time, I definitely have more confidence that Gausman's going to be much better in the strikeout department.
Michael, where are you at on Fried?
I'm pretty much there with Dave. He's a very nice pitcher for your ratios. He may not be a huge strikeout guy, but I think he has the ability to do that if that were in the cards. He's basically a control artist with an above average strikeout rate and a great ground ball rate. He doesn't give up a lot of home runs. I think he's like the perfect, number 2 pitcher to have with a high strikeout ace as your number 1, like pair him with a Corbin Burns or something. I think that's a really nice start to your staff. So, and I think he'll get a lot of wins too. He's 29, he plays for a really good team. So, outside of the elite strikeouts, Fried helps you out in all the other stats that you want.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Like Fried's a guy that I've kind of avoided in the past. I won't be doing that anymore. I also think like just watching him pitch, kind of like Dave mentioned, like I think there is more strikeout upside there if that's something he wants to go get. I think what he does is try to pitch to contact to get out of innings quicker so he can go deeper in the games, which I'm fine with because he's going to rack up a lot of quality starts, a lot of wins, whichever one is part of your format. So obviously you want to pair him with a high strikeout upside guy, like Michael just mentioned, but no problem. I think he's an ace. I want to talk about Kyle Wright and Spencer Strider because they're two guys who broke onto the scene last year in terms of just having huge breakout seasons. They're both being drafted very high. Strider even really, really high. Michael, are these guys being overdrafted because of their lack of track record, or are they actually guys you're going to be targeting this year?
This one was tough for me. I obviously, Wright had a huge breakout season, 21 wins, and I just couldn't have seen that coming. I don't think anyone could have. He's getting drafted a lot higher than he used to, obviously. My initial reaction is to avoid him, and I'm not sure if that's what's going to end up happening once I look at all the projections and compare him to who's going around there. But if I had to choose today, I would say I'm going to be fading Wright at that position. Although he does fit a lot of the criteria I look for in pitchers, it's just a matter of if I believe in him or not. I guess I don't know enough, but instinctually, I think I should avoid him being drafted at the highest point he's ever gone before. And with Strider, I think it's a little bit different. He's mostly a 2-pitch guy, but they're both, double plus pitches. and he is starting to incorporate a third pitch a little bit. He needs to do it a little more, but the fastball slider, and I mean, I followed this guy through the minor leagues. Like, he's a huge strikeout guy. I wasn't expecting him to be as good as he was last year, but this is a top, like, front line rotation type of guy. I do think he's got ace upside. There's obviously risk. I'm not sure how many innings he's going to go next year, but he's going to get way more strikeouts than he gets innings. So even if he's like 150 type innings, I still think he could crack like 200 strikeouts. So, long story short with Strider, I'm intrigued, especially if he's going, in the third round. I've seen him at some spots, so I could see taking him there, maybe even the second round. But there's risk involved with it. It's not the safest pick out there, but you can pair Strider with other guys like a Max Fried, and that would work out.
I think that's a pretty interesting pairing right there. Dave, where are you at on these guys? Are they busts, or are they guys you're looking to target?
I'll be honest with you, I don't know yet. With Kyle Wright, I really struggle to buy in that all of a sudden his walk issues are going to be completely gone. I mean, this is a guy who, just never even came close to sub 3 walks before, at least not in the majors. I mean, in the minors, he was, in AAA, he was around 3 walks per 9. I really, but he has the talent. Like, we were kind of waiting for him to put it together. He made a lot of changes. The fastball took a huge jump. I mean, it went from like 93.7 to 95.1. So he gained a lot of velocity, got a lot of swinging strikes on that. He started throwing the curve, which is elite, a lot more, kind of stopped throwing his slider much. I looked at where he's going. I don't really think I have any qualms with where Kyle Wright's going. Like, I don't think there's anybody like going around where he goes who are like, oh my God, this guy's way better than Kyle Wright. And, he's kind of going in an area where everyone has issues. Like, there's either health issues or playing like, skill level issues, stuff like that. So I think where Wright goes, he's a fine shot to take. Strider, obviously, different story. You're paying for him right off the bat, but this is a guy who, is putting up these elite numbers like in his first season, and just getting a ton of Ks. And everything looks good. My big question is, the guy throws 98 miles per hour, gets 14.4% swinging strike rate on his four seam. And then he's got an elite slider that he pairs with an absurd 24.4% swinging strike rate on that. My only concern is that he doesn't really have a third pitch. Like, he's got a changeup that he throws like 5% of the time. If he starts throwing that changeup more, I'm all in. If he's got 3 legit pitches that he can go to at any point, this guy could be the best pitcher in baseball this year. I just don't know if he's going to be throwing that pitch enough where I trust him. I'll probably go for someone who I just like. He's going at the same time as Brandon Woodruff, just a guy who I have a lot of confidence in, even if his upside isn't quite what Strider's is. But I think Michael was saying, to pair him with a guy like Corbin Burns or something like that, where you're pairing him with someone who, maybe Strider isn't the guy you start with, but if you can get him as your number 2, where you're not completely screwed if he regresses a bit, I think that might be the best approach with him.
Well, if he's your number 2, that means you're going starting pitcher early in the first round, right? Like, right. Either you're getting him at the the 2-3 turn, or you're jumping him somewhere in the middle of the second round or something like that. Like, I doubt I'm going to build my team that way this year with the depth of starting pitching, because starting pitching does feel really, really deep. I like Spencer Strider a lot, and I do have concerns about him not really having a real third pitch. However, he's got 2 elite pitches. Those 2 pitches are elite, and so I'm a little bit less concerned about it than maybe I would with a normal 2-pitch guy, because the 2 pitches are so dominant. I just can't get him as high as he's going. Like, he's currently going as the number 10 pitcher off the board. But that includes 2 relievers. So that's the 8th starting pitcher off. Like, I got him 17th. Like, that just means I'm never going to end up with him. He's never going to end up on any of my teams. I don't dislike him. but I can't project him for more than 145 innings. And even with elite ratios and elite strikeout rate, 145 innings puts him at 17 for me. So that's the unfortunate part. For me, he will likely not be on any of my teams this year, unless I'm just in a room with people who think the exact same way as me, which is pretty rare anyways. Kyle Wright, actually, I'm pretty interested in because I have him at SP 38. He's going at pitcher 47. You take out probably about 15 relievers, and we're in the ballpark. I'm still probably lower on him than consensus, but you're in the ballpark, guy. I do think it's possible that the walk rate has improved. I do think there'll also be a little bit of regression there, but it's a really, really good team. Where he can get a lot of wins. He can go deep into games. He's got a complete arsenal. I like Kyle Wright a lot. I just don't know if I like him as much as the field likes him. You see these kind of helium guys who blow up, in 1 year, and then they just get a little bit overdrafted. I feel like that's happened to both Kyle Wright and Spencer Strider here. Charlie Morton is kind of the opposite, right? He's the old guy, the reliable guy. Kind of had some pretty big ups and downs in 2022. Dave, going back to the well on Charlie Morton?
Yeah, he was the guy I had a lot of last year. Yeah, I don't know. I'm conflicted because a lot of this looks like, just small sample bad luck. I mean, he had a 3.48 Sierra, which is much more indicative probably of how he was pitching. I mean, everything looked in line with his previous metrics, swing strike rate, K rate, walk rate, velocity, all still there. He really looked like he should have had much better results than what he had. Is it a concern that he's 39 years old now? Sure. And I watched a lot of Charlie Morton starts last year, unfortunately. He just at times really struggles to make the pitch that he needs to make. He'll be cruising along for 4 innings with 1 hit, and then all of a sudden everything will fall apart. He'll lose feel for his off-speed pitches or his fastball or both randomly, and there is some concern there, but I do think that I think we're gonna have regression of that home run rate, which was 1.47 home runs per 9, which was the highest of his career, or at least since 2010 in Pittsburgh. By a wide margin. I mean, he wasn't even close to that any other year. So, yeah, I think regression probably puts him back significantly higher. Will he be a target for me? I don't know. I'll have to see kind of who else in that range I might like slightly more, but I do think he'll be an option.
What about you, Michael?
Yeah, I kind of agree with most of that there. I mean, it was his highest ERA since 2015. He had a 3.34 ERA when you go 2017 to 2021. I think the concern with him is covered in the draft price. So, this is a guy that a lot of smart people would kind of target after pick 100 last year or something. And, he's dropped down even further now. And I just think, like Dave said, the skills are kind of there. There's some concern with the age, if he's actually becoming a worse pitcher because he's getting too old. That would be my one main concern with him. But as far as his actual skills, if he's still the same pitcher he's always been, I think he could be a really nice piece for a lot of teams this coming year.
He just got crushed by the home run ball in some starts. It wasn't even every game. It wasn't like I'm giving up 2 home runs a game or anything. But he just got crushed with it in really inopportune moments. I'm not overly worried. I think there's a nice little discount this year. I think players like him are often kind of just ignored because they're so old, but he's shown that he's a guy that's pretty resilient, that does his work. This is probably his last season anyways. It's the last year of his deal in Atlanta. So I think he has I think he's a good buyback opportunity. He's also a guy that it doesn't work out. I think he's a lot easier to drop this year than he was in 2022. Last 3 guys I want to talk about that are kind of potential number 5s for this rotation, or maybe end up being their 6 or 7 starters. Ian Anderson, who's an absolute train wreck of a draft pick, who's going as a top 40 starter coming into last year. Bryce Elder, who had some nice little runs kind of as their number 5 and bouncing between the bullpen And then Mike Soroka, who is projected right now to be their fifth starter, but has not pitched in a major league game since 2020 due to injuries. I think it's since 2020, if I'm remembering correctly. Yeah, since 2020. And he only pitched 13 innings that year. Michael, do you care about any of these guys from a fantasy sense?
Well, I mean, not on the surface, but because of the organization and the fact that they've been bringing in some, really quality pitchers recently, theoretically, if one of them were to like kind of take over and break out to some degree, I could see them being a good pick. But, like Soroka, like you said, he's just had 14 innings since 2020. There's too much injury risk there. And, he has a low strikeout minus walk rate too for his career. I just don't believe he's a strong whip guy, kind of guy who I think will have like a higher ERA. And like I said, just the injuries alone, it's too much for me for 2023. Ian Anderson, I was never a huge believer in him. I mean, I think he was kind of overrated last year, and that proved. I don't think he's as bad as we saw this year, but I don't think he's as good as we saw the year before either. So I could see him working out. I mean, all these guys, this is more about the organization than the actual players. I think I wouldn't be really interested in any of these players if they were on some bad team. But if one of these guys could come in as the fifth starter and kind of take that spot and go with it, and get double-digit wins with decent ratios and stuff, that's where my interest lie. But I don't have a lot of confidence in any of these players. I mean, we saw Bryce Elder show some flashes of it, but I followed him through the minor leagues too. He's more of a back-end rotation guy, so I don't have a confidence in these players, but their situation could lead to value if one of them steps forward.
Dave?
Well, Bryce Elder definitely won some leagues last year who picked him up because he had some pretty monster starts from August on. But yeah, I mean, looking at his skill set, like he's not getting a lot of swing and miss. He's throwing low 90s. It's hard to see that working out over an extended period. Soroka, no, I have no interest in Soroka whatsoever. I mean, he hasn't really pitched since 2019, 14 innings in 2020, whatever. It's, I wish him luck. He's going to have issues going deep into games, going deep into the season, building back up and everything. And I hope it's a good recovery year for him, but he's not going to be on my team. Ian Anderson, I think, is interesting. Like, there's clearly the talent is there, but the problem is that, like, when he's off, my God, does he torture your team? I mean, he'll give up, 7 runs, 5 runs. He had a lot of those kind of outings. I think Ian Anderson is the most interesting to me from like an upside standpoint. Like, take a shot on him, and if he, maybe in a DC or whatever, he might not start with the team, but he'll probably get a bunch of starts there. And if he does look like what he can look like, then he'll, obviously regain a slot in that rotation at some point. And you can take him around pick 500. I think he's worth taking a shot there.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you guys. I love Soroka. I'm a big Mike Soroka guy, but like he just hasn't pitched. Like have to see him on the mound. Because even if he is healthy coming in the year, like how many innings can we reasonably expect some guy who hasn't thrown any innings the last 2 seasons at the major league level, like to actually
100 maybe
100? Yeah, maybe. And he's one of those guys because he's got such a low strikeout rate that he needs volume to be valuable. I'm in on Mike Soroka for 2024 if he has a healthy 2023, but I'm not in for this year. So Ian Anderson, like they had some issues in the rotation down the stretch, like as they are like competing to win that division, and Ian Anderson never returned. That tells me a lot. Like, if they're like, he didn't come back into the bullpen, he didn't come back as a starter, like he just didn't come back. So I think if you're taking a shot on a fifth starter, it's Bryce Elder. I think he got really lucky at the end of the season. And like Dave said, helps some teams win some fantasy championships, but I'm probably gonna be looking to another organization for their fifth starter as opposed to picking one from the Braves. So let's finish out with their bullpen. Rosario Iglesias goes from being a really, really high price setup guy to being the closer. Now that Kenley Jansen is signed in Boston. How excited are you about Rosario Iglesias, Dave?
Yeah, no, very. I mean, he's he's the guy. I mean, he's their closer for sure. No question. And he's going around pick 77, so you don't have to take him, I mean, this is probably before that it had cleared up a bit. Like I see his min pick is like 44. That's probably, when you're talking about like the live drafts, you're probably going to see him going in that, like, I would say 3rd round range, probably maybe 4th at the latest, but I don't even think he's going to slide that far. I mean, he's a bona fide closer. And I don't think there'll be, as good as AJ Minter is, I don't think there's going to be any question that it's Reisel's job. So, I think he'll be a good pick to be a top closer this year again.
Yeah, Iglesias has already started to move up in the ADP. Already moved up around 10 spots if you look over in just December drafts. So, yeah, I think his price is going to settle in around that, like kind of just inside
3rd round
50. Yeah, so which I'm here for. I love Marcell Iglesias. It was a huge bummer. I know he's considered a bust, but it wasn't, like fantasy managers shouldn't have expected him to get traded midseason to be a setup guy.
And it happened after the fucking call too. Like literally, like the trade deadline happened, and then all of a sudden that was one of the things that came out later. And Tony and I realized that we just lost 2 closers at the deadline that we weren't even expecting to lose at all. We're just like, oh fuck.
Yeah.
How did this happen?
I think he goes back to being one of the safer closers in the game.
Yeah.
I concur with what you guys are saying. And also, I actually like Iglesias more than I did last year as the Braves closer versus the Angels closer. If you were in on him as priced last year, I think you should definitely be in on him this year.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Is there a handcuff, Michael? Like, is there someone you like would handcuff to him? Like, let's say in a DC.
Let me check out the roster resource real quick.
So they have a couple. I mean, obviously Minter is the big one, but they also picked up Joe Jimenez and Kirby Yates, who both have some closer experience. But Kirby Yates hasn't pitched since, like, again, like he's Mike Soroka basically in the bullpen. Like he hasn't pitched since 2019.
It's just a gamble, I think.
Right.
Right.
No, and he's like 36 now. But I'm just saying in terms of like, if Kirby Yates looks like Kirby Yates, he'll be, he might be the backup closer there.
Yeah, I mean, Minter's a lefty too, so I mean that could come into the factor. I mean, the Braves traded for Jimenez, so they may see him. He was kind of the guy for the Tigers, or was supposed to be. He has some intrigue. I could see Jimenez being the guy who takes over as the closer if Iglesias were to get hurt.
Joe Jimenez is the cautionary tale of why you do not invest in closing prospects.
Yeah,
like in Dynasty. Like if you're a Dynasty guy, like never invest in the closer of the future in the minor leagues, because that was Joe Jimenez. And for those of you who are older, like me, Joel Zumaye, is another really
good Joel Zumaye,
from those same Tigers. So,
but look at what Jimenez had a year last year, man. I mean, he was good.
He was really good.
12.2 K per 9, 2 walks per 9. He held the home runs in check. I mean, everything checked out. He was finally starting to become the guy that the Tigers hoped would be their closer for for their franchise closer. I mean, he was their guy. Everybody was talking about Joe Jimenez, and then 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, it was just like disaster, and it was just never worked out for him. But he could be a future closer.
I will say, though, it's a lot easier to keep those home runs in check the way that Comerica Park played in 2022 as opposed to the short porch in Atlanta.
But he never had before. Look at his home run rate in Comerica every other year. It's never been good.
Yeah, but I mean, you saw what like a lot of the hitters did. Like all of a sudden, like nobody could hit it out of that ballpark.
True.
That's the dead ball in that park.
Yeah.
So
good point.
I would be careful. I do think Jimenez would get might get the first shot. I don't want to say will get the first shot because I think they could easily go to Minter. They have other lefties, on that team. So, but I think he is an interesting name. All right, that's going to wrap us up for this episode. Michael, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, I really appreciate this. Had a lot of fun talking with you guys. We talked a little bit before the show. Maybe we'd do some prospect talk down the road, and definitely be interested in doing that with you guys too.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, we'll definitely we'll set something up once I get through this hellacious month of 30 podcasts in 30 days. Remind us where you can be reached on social media, and then plug your work again.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at mprichards1981. You can find my writing at Fantrax, and you can find me on the podcast at Triple Play Fantasy and on YouTube each week.
All right, Dave, what are you working on? Where can you be reached?
You can reach me on Twitter at RunDMCD. Add that D, and I'm hoping as we start getting ramped up here, I can coax Jake out of his shell, and we can start doing some podcasts again. I think we're finally starting to get fantasy football coming to an end here next week or so. So I don't even know if he's in any leagues anymore. I'm out of the playoffs now. My last league after Michael Pittman laid an egg today. So. I think it's going to be, New Year's time to get back into fantasy baseball full time.
You can reach me on Twitter at Justin Mason FWFB. Email me or the show, friendsfantasybenefits@gmail.com. Definitely give us a 5-star review. Really, really helps us out. If you do, we'll give you a shout out on the podcast, and we'll do some sort of future prize giveaway for those people as well. I typically write daily Fangraphs. But actually, by the time you're going to hear this on January 1st, I will be back to writing daily Fangraphs. I'm actually going to spend the week before this pod comes out doing projections. So hopefully all my projections will be done by the end of the week. And you're going to be hearing 30 podcasts from me in 30 days, plus whatever I do on Sleeper on the Bus or TGFBI. That will wrap us up for Dave, Michael, myself. Thank you for listening. Have a fantastic baseball offseason.